So moving on, delighted to introduce. I'm delighted to introduce our wonderful panel of speakers, starting with Mr. Prince Singh. He is currently leading Austex Pharma as managing director. He has 12 plus years of work experience in the industry. His key areas of expertise includes pharmaceuticals, marketing, branding, operations, consulting, and entrepreneurship. Moving on, we have Dr. Roshan Palewar, CEO and Global Pharma Leader at DocRoSh Global Solutions. He's an entrepreneur, global pharma leader, researcher, formulator, psychologist, doctor, international speaker, and avid pharmaceutical enthusiast. With 15 plus years of rich global experience, he has researched and developed over 400 plus medicines and launched many pharmaceutical products across various regions. Next up, we have Dr. Satchidananda Ray, Vice President, Healthcare and Strategy, BC Jindal Group. He has more than 16 plus years of experience in strategic marketing, business development consulting, and innovation. He has also led innovative marketing and value chain management process along with developing various strategic alliances along APAC and Africa region. Moving on, we have Mr. Rahul Balakrishnan, an alumnus of MDI Gurgaon, having 10 plus years of work experience under his belt. He is currently leading Gartner, is director having expertise in the field of management consulting, business research, and product management. Last but not the least, we have the moderator of the discussion, Mr. Nirupam Srivastava, Vice President Strategy, New Initiatives, AI, and of Hero Enterprise. Uh, a management uh, a management professional with more than 20 plus years of experience. Mr. Srivastav has led corporate and business strategy, merger and acquisition, and other functionaries with companies like IBM, Schneider Electric, Infosys, Diageo, and Nokia in global and country leadership roles. So today, I would like to introduce the topic of the discussion that will be deflationary effect of technology on service industry. The importance of this topic being with the ever-growing prevalence of data, we are optimizing our operations, making them efficient with every passing day. This leads to minimizing cost of service, indirectly leading to deflationary effect. Further, to shed more light upon this topic, I would like to call upon Nirupam sir to take this conversation ahead.
Sure, thank you, Tejasvi, and I think it's a wonderful introduction to the topic. Uh, I somehow can't see the other panel members. If you can pin them, that would be easier for me to see them and interact with them. Uh, I hope you guys can see me and hear me well.
Yes, hi Nirupam.
Hi.
Hi, Nirupam, this is Prince.
Wonderful. Now I can see you, but not again together, which is a bit surprising. Let me try and see. Things are okay. So what I would recommend is, other than speakers, if all other people can switch off their videos, it would be wonderful, because then I will have my screen optimized to see the speakers. That would be really helpful. So thank you all, and sure. So coming to the topic is what we are looking at is again, thanks to the Strategy Club and the Consulting Club at IIM Sirmaur and this event Sampreshan, and the overall theme as well, which is around nowcasting versus forecasting. And we all know since last 2.5 years how our forecasts have gone out of the window. And the topic for this today's conversation essentially is around how we can how is technology creating an impact overall, as a lot of business leaders and technology leaders have uh, kind of elucidated that, starting from Satya Nadella, who said that, when the COVID started, we are seeing 2 years of technology growth in 2 months. So that's kind of impact technology is making. But since we are at IIM Sirmaur and our focus is more aligned towards management and strategy and consulting, so we will also look at the aspects how this technology is impacting the business world in terms of how it's impacting the consumers, how it's impacting the organizations in terms of how they are looking at leveraging this technology, plus also the price point, as the key theme is around deflation. So how is technology helping deflation? And we also have this other side, fear of hyperinflation due to quantitative easing and the central banks printing a lot of money, which some speakers, some thinkers, some writers say that this is essentially a distraction for the economists, which are not able to understand the impact which technology is creating in terms of the deflationary economy, because it's creating more efficiency, and efficiency essentially leads to a price reduction, which or at least balancing of margins by reducing price and reducing costs, and that's where this thing is. So what I would do is I would right now first go around the room, and we have 1.5 hours. And those who are on the call, please feel free to drop in your questions, because we would like this to be as interactive as live as possible. So first, let me go around the table based on how I see you on my screen, and that would help me to understand, where what you are seeing in your industry, in your field, in your business, in your vertical. What is the role technologies making in terms of either costs or prices, and what is the impact you are seeing? So let me start with Satchidanand, because I see you first on my screen, and then again I request
Sure.
IIM Sirmaur team to please switch off your videos, because then it clutters my screen. So please let only the speakers and the panelist videos be on. Thank you again, and Satchidanand, over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Nirupam. I think it's a great panel. And first of all, thanks to IIM for inviting us for this fantastic panel. Now, just to add some perspective on the deflationary effect of the technology, let's understand where is this all coming from. And I represent an industry which is healthcare equipment and medical equipment for last 14, 15 years. So I was earlier with Philips Healthcare, then with Siemens, and now with Jindal Group, and all into medical equipment. I also used to be an auto consultant for Mahindras and Tatas for some time. So I fairly understand that industry as well. But if I were to take the example of medical equipment industry, let me come up with a specific example. The last MR, or magnetic resonance imaging machine innovation which happened took almost 10 years. A CT innovation has taken almost 8 years. Now, contrary to what we see in the other parts of the industry where Moore's law is taking a big precedence, in medical equipment, the innovation cycles are pretty long. But given that there are small sectors where innovation is happening pretty fast, like let's say the service industry. So from a face-to-face service technician kind of service, we have moved to online tracking of the call logs or the records or the medical records on EMR, etc. And then what's happening is we can detect if there is some incomplete data getting filled up in the EMR, or if we can say that there is some call log which says that, okay, the MR might be due for some kind of a service, or a CT might be due for some kind of a repair immediately because the transducer or the part has been used for more than 10,000 hours or 15,000 hours. Now, that has reduced the requirement for service personnel visits substantially. Just to give you an example, in a region where there were about 10 to 15 people who used to go for preventive checkups every 3 months for these heavy machines, now it has come down to just 3-4 people, because all of it is being centrally monitored. And then through an automated route, they get an alert on the mobile that such and such machine in Nasik uh, might require a replacement of one LED control panel. So such kinds of things are actually helping us in improving our efficiency. But I think what is missing out in this entire game is that because we are losing out touch, that physical touch or the face-to-face kind of relationship with the customers, we are also losing out prospective buyers. Because let's say a ultrasound buyer is planning to upgrade to a CT scan or a MRI. Now, earlier when our service technician used to go for a face-to-face visit, he used to also get the lead that, okay, the customer is planning to upgrade, now he has the funds. But now due to the automation procedure, we are able to cut down on costs, but I don't know whether it is improving the sales funnel or not. So that's one typical thing which is happening. Now coming back to the fundamental innovation side, where medical technology takes about 8 to 10 years for a typical product to come out. there we see that there are a lot of products which are coming out in the market, but by the time the adoption happens, it is easily a few years, because doctors, as you know, are the more resistant, most resistant, because they have worked on a certain kind of technology. They take a lot of time to change over. So obviously 10 years for innovation and 2-3 years for adoption. So it's a good 10 to 13 years lag between one version and another. So I feel this technology cycle is not comparable to other industries, and that's where we are in a different learning curve altogether. That's a basic dilemma that we have in our industry. So maybe yeah, I can add on specific points after this.
So thank you, Satchidananda, Dr. Satchidananda. This is wonderful because, as you rightly mentioned around doctors, actually, I also look after the healthcare initiatives at Hero Group. And we have a very big hospital and a medical college and couple of ancillary stuff at Ludhiana, which
Yes,
is called Satchidananda Medical College and Hospital. And
yes.
we continuously chase this and trying to get more and latest technology. Of course, doctors want latest technology. It's not that they don't want it, but
Right.
they're also very skeptic on technology. So it's a always a continuing discussion, if I were to say, not a continuing battle, but continuing discussion, and we always try to keep improving further and further. So, but again, wonderful points, and I will come back to you probably once we have a round with other
Sure.
panel speakers, and to taking this further on how we can more leverage this part. So thank you again. And I would now invite Dr. Roshan Palewar, if you can share how you are seeing this impact of technology in your domain, and whether it's a price inflationary or price deflationary, how you are seeing these things. Over to you.
Yeah, very fine. Good afternoon, Nirupam, and thank you for giving the opportunity. Also, very special thanks to IIM Sirmaur for having us for absolutely interactive sessions and understanding the technological impact on day-to-day business, whether it's manufacturing the services. So, since I had come from the hardcore pharmaceutical background with research and manufacturing domain of more than 15 years, that to be in the global leadership positions. First thing, what I personally feel as a pharmaceutical professional, where the industry is growing, if I just give a glimpse about how the global pharma industry as of today versus in the past and the technological adoption in the sectors. If I take you back in 2001, the industry was around $390 billion, whereas in 2014, it's already crossed $1 trillion US. And when I looked right away in 2022, it's already $1.25 trillion. And by 23 is going to be another like $1.5 trillion. So this is significant growth happening in the industry, in the pharmaceutical, specifically in the global market. Whereas in the Indian pharma sector too, it's growing rapidly with a CAGR of around 15.84 percentile, and standing today at 55 billion US dollars. So this is how the industry is growing rapidly, and the technology is playing a crucial role in terms of uplifting the standards, uplifting the services as well as the manufacturing. And specifically, if I talk about the manufacturing point of view versus the service sector, the technology is there in the day-to-day operations, starting from identifying the different dossiers, documentations, doing the different research. The technology is also there in the manufacturing segment from the productions, and more interestingly, the service sector is booming. Reason behind is that there is an upper hand of technology, because that is helping us to enhance the output productivity and giving the optimum results in a given period of time without making us to go for the multiple errors that possibly happens, right? So technological evolution is absolutely taking the industry to the next level, and this is going to happen further. Now, if I refer to deflation versus the inflations, this is very sensitive parameter. The economy lies between the balance of both deflation versus inflations, and here the technological evolution would be also going to be very interesting. How this is going to balance the economy whereas at one hand there is a continuous improvement in the productivity output. The pricings are because of the productivity, demands are possibly getting down, whereas the pricings has to be balanced out with the very narrow margin in the profitability perspective. So this is very interesting that technology also need to be balanced in both the perspectives, so that there is a win-win situations with respect to the industry as well as the economy of the country. Yeah.
Wonderful point. In fact, I think Dr. Roshan, on the pharmaceutical side, I think this industry has been the biggest beneficiary of COVID,
Absolutely.
if I were to use that term.
Absolutely.
And also it has spawned newer services and newer domains, like the testing, for example, or the vaccination services, which were
Right.
earlier ignored, by hospitals, are now a big part which they are playing the role in fighting this pandemic.
Exactly.
And again, and as we talk of pricing, it's stark, the kind of price differentials the same service can be charged for, and this, for example, if we look at our neighboring country, the vaccine which we were getting for $1,000 approximately I'm talking of Pakistan here. They were buying
Right.
it for like 14,000 and 15,000. So this is a 15x multiplier on that same vaccines. I'm referring to Sputnik here. So
Exactly.
this is
Exactly.
this is kind of somewhat crazy, and I am sure a lot of students would probably do some research work in this field. How the pandemic has played role in
Sure.
different companies and different products.
And just to add, Nirupam, on this point, the best example of the technology adoptions and evolution at the same time is during the pandemic itself, right? Where the entire world got impacted. India too is a part of that. Whereas being the Indian pharmaceutical industry, where there is ample technology, the ample resources, the ample talent, and the ample platform available, India could have, India took this as a real challenge and adopted the manufacturing, the resources, the service segment, and the technology to ensure the COVID drugs, for example, favipiravir tablets, the remdesivir injections, the molnupiravir injections got manufactured in the what do you call the third-party manufacturing facilities under the CDMO. On the other side, where the government was coming forward, the agencies were coming forward and working as a cohesive team. If you look into the entire healthcare segment, obviously the authorities are playing a crucial roles. At the same time, the hospitals came forward, the pharmacists came forward, the resources across the sectors and the patients at the same time, and bringing the what do you call the umbrella services. This is a massive vaccination program across the country. It's itself the testimony of how the technology can play a crucial role in bringing the best of the best in a given time frame. Yeah.
Absolutely, Dr. Roshan. So now I will move on to Prince, as I see on my screen. So Prince, how do you see this, the impact of technology in your domain or domains, and please share your experience.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, IIM, for inviting me as a speaker here. I'm very much pleased. And I was wanting that somebody brings this topic. Everybody talks about inflation in all the political rallies that you see. Everywhere there is noise about roti kapra makan prices increasing day by day. But nobody is seeing this looming danger of deflation. And I would just like to tell you that economics is driven by scarcity and technology is creating abundance. So this is where deflation is going to make a bigger impact. Also, the cost of stopping deflation is almost 3 times that of running the entire economy of the world. If you look at the depth that is required to control deflation is almost 3 times of this fact. Also, if you look at technology is obviously deflationary on the service sector because it's riding an exponential form of growth owing to its scalability. We are seeing lower prices for everything as days are progressing. Be it if you look at when I was in college in 2010, I used to charge around 50,000 for website development. And now if you go to the market, you will see that people are building your websites for 5,000 rupees. Also, when I was in college for 50,000, there were 2 people that I had to involve. Now there is a single guy who sits for about 6 to 8 hours. He makes a website. It looks much better than what was there before. Also, if you look at, there are a lot of other technology players that have come. Also, they are becoming unicorns. If you look at Postman, they create API services for you. Way back in 2010, 2009, we had to deploy people, about 2 to 3 people, who used to build up these API services. Also, if you look at every tech company which is involved in the service sector, wants to make the world a better places. But are we making the world a better place? And I don't think that this is going to come now. The impact, we are not going to see the impact in the next 20 years. The impact will be felt after the 20 years have passed. Like if you look at in the pharma sector itself, we used to have people who used to do this artwork design, the development and everything. When we had CDR, Corel Draw formats. So in any company, there used to be around 5. If we speak about big manufacturing companies, like we manufacture most of our drugs from ACUMs. So they used to have this around 20 to 30 people sitting and making the artwork now. And now if you look at it, the 30 people have come down to 5. Now, if you visit plants like Jaipur and Surat, where they were initially 20, 30 years back, the number of tailors which were involved in the textile industry, now if you look at the number of tailors which are involved, so, there has been a huge difference, and people are celebrating technology. We are celebrating AI. We are very much happy that Tesla is bringing up all these driverless cars. But what about the drivers who are employed with us now? Be it that they are getting 10,000 or 12,000, but in the longer run, these people are just going to fall off the road. And then I think this is only going to create huge economic inequality, which is already there, but the difference is only going to rise up. Also, if you look at Blockbuster, which had around 9,000 stores in USA at some point of time, they didn't see the wave of OTT coming. So now when we said, I am very much, I'm not, I look at things from a very ground perspective. So when we used to visit these movie halls, say about agar we 2 to 3 people are going, we used to spend around 1,200. Now for same watching that Pushpa movie, I hardly spent around 120, and we people of group of 10 people watched. So we are thinking we saved a lot of money. But did we save a lot of money? Yes, we saved a lot of money. But now those 10 people who were dependent on that movie hall for their revenue, they didn't get what they would have. Now, similarly, it will have impact. Now I sell medicines. So if people don't have money to buy medicines, so whom am I going to sell those medicines to? If people don't have money to buy costly medicines, so they are going to buy generics, and I don't deal with generics. So there is an impact to everything, be it service industry, be it the product industry. Technology is impacting everyone. We are not seeing these demons now. There is no discussion going on around here, but around 20 years down the line, we'll see that it will be a much bigger force than what inflation is today. Now, there are a lot of things that I can speak on, but I think that I should let others speak, and we'll keep on adding.
Thank you, Prince. And I think you touched a very, very important aspect into on the pricing aspects, especially you talked about generics, for example, and it related me to the low-cost airline concept, which happened right some time back. Now, I don't think still exists in India, but a lot of people who were earlier not able to fly were able to fly thanks to low-cost airlines, and even though of course it was no frill and low frill services, it was not really like the flying experience they are going for. They are just going for the purpose of moving from city A to city B. But again, it's a good point, and it actually for students and for the strategy professionals and the consultants, I think the bigger message is that your service offerings need to change, or the consumer preferences might change, as you talked about between OTT and the cinema. So if you are a movie producer and if you don't align yourself with the new channel or new service offering of OTT, you might be left off, and that could be a bit of a problem. So one has to understand these new dynamics and the digital channels which are coming up, and I think it's a very, very relevant point. So now let me invite Rahul. And Rahul, you are from Gartner, and you have. So I will not only ask your perspective, but also what you are seeing in the industry, what's happening overall, to just give us a sense of what you are seeing from your side, technology and the role of technology and deflation in services industry. So over to you, Rahul.
Thank you so much. Thank you to IIM Sirmaur for the invite. I'm learning a lot of diverse perspectives already listening into the last 30 minutes from various industries. So thank you for sharing all that. Thank you to the other panelists. As I look at the impact on services or customer service, I'll speak one about from my work experience and just my experience of looking at customer service as an industry, as well as a consumer. Now, on the first front, I do see that it is interesting to compare manufacturing and services, usually thought of as very different, tangible versus intangible. Um, at keeping loosely, say, at the manufacturing front, as a lot of panelists mentioned, there is a level of scale and efficiency that can be gained thanks to technology. And on the services front, there is a level of personalization that is possible for customers, a personalization that helps um, deliver an experience where, say, if somebody is emailing a company about an issue, and they say move to the chat, they are able to get a seamless transition. You don't need to repeat it. I'm sure everyone who's listening into this call has had that experience of where you're speaking to a new person and possibly you have to repeat the whole issue you have with a particular organization or a complaint. That only exacerbates the issue which you have in the first place. Now, with this whole omni-channel experience, that really technology has helped with using data to deliver an experience where life becomes slightly easier if you compare it with in the past. So the quality of services have improved over a period of time thanks to technology. And the interesting part is also that the prices have either remained stagnant or one actually wonders that, okay, who's paying for this in terms of, I have not changed. At times when I look at different businesses or models, you wonder, okay, how are they making money? Or where exactly is, I'm not doing anything different. Am I being charged for this? But because companies are competing for delivering a higher level of customer service while not charging the customer for it. And as a customer, we can at times feel a bit spoiled also that, okay, I expect a level of service which would be very difficult for certain smaller organizations to deliver who are, say, early in the curve in their technology, or say may not have the deep pockets of the bigger organizations that we have so accustomed to now. I read this book recently called The Attention Economy, where it was talking about how, say, Netflix is slashing prices in India. If you look at it from a conventional supply and demand perspective, the supply of it, you get access to, as somebody also already mentioned, for a particular fee, I get access to a worldwide level of titles, which you can watch. And on the demand side, it's the amount of time you're awake and watching something. A lot of you would have noticed that Netflix now has this quick laugh section so that anybody who's waiting in a line or sitting somewhere for that 5 minutes, they're competing with a different app, which is completely different in terms of their offering, so that people don't only focus on these 8 episode or 8 series kind of, or 8 season kind of an effort. So it's interesting, and it's very difficult as a customer and even for businesses as well, more so, to price things correctly, because there are various models which are taught to business school students about value-based pricing or cost-based pricing. Now, some of these, just taking forward the example of OTT series, some of these take a lot of expenditure to make, and they are really high-quality productions. But since there are so many variety of options, it almost one sees the future as all these organizations are competing for how can we keep customers hooked onto a particular platform, because the demand beyond a point is limited by how many hours can a person watch or consume content. So again, limited by prices being so low. Coming back to the example of customer service and personalization, the increasing advent of chatbots or the usage of data. Now, while there is a lot of talk around AI and use of artificial intelligence, we're still very early in that curve. There is a long journey to be had there in terms of usage of that and wider adoption. But even in the early stages, we notice a lot of advantages as customers. We notice there is a higher quality of service that is being provided for a lot less, which is a good place to be as a customer. But as the previous panelist also pointed out, that in the future, that maybe we are setting ourselves up for a trajectory which might become a bit uncontrollable and have other detrimental effects. a good example, and I'll pause after sharing this, is how massive online open courses started out. In terms of it started out as a revolution of, okay, there is a democratization of education. That is true. It is absolutely true that there is very good content out there from prestigious universities that one can access to. At the same time, the pricing of it can be a bit difficult for pricing is not truly reflective of quality at times as well. Some of it is our big brands, some of it is like a really good YouTube course. You don't need to pay for anything. So, and over a period of time, you'd notice that now with master classes, with a variety of individuals getting on board, as customers, as somebody who wants to learn anything, there is everything out there you can become really smart about if you use it well. At the same time, the pricing is not reflective of the quality. And as an independent viewer, you might almost feel like, okay, that's a really good course. I almost feel guilty. I didn't pay anything for it. So that's that. When I have taken any of these, I have had that reaction myself. So it's becoming an interesting play in terms of how price is related to supply and demand and to the quality of the offering itself. I'll pause there for any thoughts or reaction.
Again, thanks, Rahul. It's wonderful, and a lot of examples you covered are very, very relevant. And and I will also give some examples which probably sound like counter to what you just said, but again could be quite interesting. For example, if we look at the food delivery services, right? Pre-COVID, most of them were free delivery, right? So, and basically paid out of their margin. But once the COVID started, everybody started charging, and now it's by de facto a paid service. Same way we look at things like what we are doing right now, the video conferencing services, right? The Zoom started and everybody else started, and we initially had a lot of free stuff, but now everybody is moved slowly and steadily onto a paid model. And if you want to do something of significant value, and obviously they have also embellished a lot of services and offerings into this stuff. So a lot of stuff we are also seeing, a lot of service economy stuff, even simple things like the cloud service providers. If you were to use that, a lot of them were giving free, yeah, please come on the cloud, you have a Google Drive but now Google is now limiting it big time. Everything is now like, earlier it was unlimited photos, now it's very, very, very limited photos, and people are actually stuck what to do with those. So lots and lots of stuff are actually moving towards pricing. But again, what's still happening is still its efficiency, in some sense deflation, because if I were to go to that shop and get that food, which is now otherwise getting delivered for between 50 to 30 to 50 to 100 bucks, depending on from where and what city it's charging. It is still economical, because I would go there and spend my time to pick that dessert and come back home is definitely a lot more than that in terms of only fuel. Forget the time value. So I think that's very, very interesting part. And even though I got some list of questions out there, but I will now actually make this more conversational, and I would the team at IIM Sirmaur, students and the club members can now switch on their videos, because we just done one round. And feel free, and again, if there are some questions on the chat, somebody can share with me, and I can then take that and make it more interactive, rather than I putting in some questions and we all discussing that. So Tejasvi, team, please feel free to switch on your videos in case you want to, and in case you want to ask a question, definitely do that, please. And in case there are questions on the chat, please let me see if there are. I don't know. I do not see so per se, but yeah. Harpreet, I see you. Harmeet, sorry, I'm not able to see your name right. So any questions you guys want to ask the panel? I think it's a wonderful panel. I really enjoyed getting the different perspectives, and I'm sure you guys enjoyed it too. But any questions you guys want to ask, and please unmute yourself, and you can take questions from the chat or whatever has come from. We can't hear you, Tejasvi.
Sir, we will take questions. Sir, we will take questions in the end.
Okay, we'll take questions then. Okay, wonderful. So let's continue our conversation, and thank you again, Ashmeet. So the second question which I would like to take is the investments part of the cycle, right? So most of the business do investments in technology, and the focus of these investments is to improve productivity. I would like to understand from you, each of you, and probably I will go in reverse order now, starting with Rahul and that. What kind of investments you see people making in your domains or generally, and what do you think the future impact would be of those investments, and how long will it take for the industry to see, or industry or consumer to see the impact of it?
Sure.
Over to you. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for the question. From my work experience, one of the things I notice is since the industries and the impact of technology is fast moving, as we have all acknowledged. Companies are often reliant on, okay, what is everyone else doing in terms of technology investments? What are the focus areas that everyone else is focusing on? There might be an industry leader, somebody who has started out with, say, a particular way of thinking about a business problem. Technology ultimately is a tool to improve productivity or to improve service levels. There might be an industry leader who starts out with a particular investment focused on improving cloud computing. Everyone else seems to be enamored by that shining object and saying, okay, I'm also going to invest some time and effort. The passage of time and changes are so quick that ultimately that is a key determinant in focus areas for technology investments. Is, for example, the pausing and reflecting, is this good for my business, is often an afterthought. The example which I noted was, as I mentioned, say chatbots or using AI or most of machine learning for improving service delivery or predicting the kind of questions that can come from a type of customers depending on the service they have been provided. Now, not all companies require this level of customer service. To be fair, there is an upfront investment that is required to achieve these outcomes. I have noticed that companies at times jump into this because they notice that others are doing it. It's a good way. It's not a bad way in itself to be aware of what somebody else is doing. But that question of, is this valuable for business? What am I trying to achieve, rather than always looking at, okay, this every company is trying to revolutionize something. And that can be a challenge because you can't have revolutions every 6 months in a particular area. You could, but it's just that it's usually slightly more widespread. So that is one area I notice as a pitfall. But at the same time, I guess the need for staying in news and staying in the current fad should not be missed out on. So that is one area of investment, which is, okay, what's somebody else doing is often noted in technology and usage of it. At times, companies get very, as I mentioned, technology is a tool for an outcome. As long as we are not clear of that outcome and we take that outcome from an industry or a peer or a competitor, it might lead to results which were not entirely desirable. A lot of upfront investment goes in with very little to show for in terms of maybe we could have done business without it as well.
No, great point, Rahul. And in fact, I had the similar challenge when I was implementing chatbot pilots at my company. And one of the things we all need to understand with technology and technology implementation is a large number of these projects fail actually. So, and that's a given, you know. So if you kind of do 5 projects, only one would succeed, or even lower. So that's where, you know, this the kind of dynamic which plays in the from a corporate as resource allocation problem, if I were to use that word, that how much money you should put on these new projects versus your existing projects of maintaining this technology infrastructure. So how do you take some or how do you see industry people take some decisions or choices in terms of how much they should put onto these new but high risk technology initiatives, even though they may be a bit of a fad thing, and how to divide between the core and the real impact kind of stuff. So what's your view on the market?
To assess some of these trends, a longer period is required in general to some of Gartner's work, or even the commentary around how something is progressing, it requires some more data points to assess a particular trend. A lot of progress often is incremental progress, and that can come across as boring in terms of just keeping things running or making things just it's almost like building bridges and maintaining it. It's more fun to create new bridges and link previously unlinked areas. That's important, but maintaining things so that they don't break is also an important part of businesses. While the more ahead in the curve businesses, which rank in, say, the top part of Fortune 500, they have the ability to look more into the future. They can keep a larger percentage of their budget for R&D, for forward-looking projects which can have a long gestation period. The more companies which are new, the companies which are fighting for survival in terms of, okay, let's live today, let's live the next 6 months. Typically, the challenge becomes when they start focusing on things where it's less maintenance, less stable revenue, and more of let's see how this plays out. So companies need to be very clear on where they're operating in this technology curve and who are their true competitors. Otherwise, if you're punching way above your weight, you are trying to pick up battles which are very difficult for you to fight. And therefore, the unglamorous parts of incremental improvement are not that bad to achieve that space. Otherwise, these buzzwords around AI, machine learning, and the world losing a lot of jobs or there being a lot of changes, they're true, but one can survive and thrive without those as well.
Sure. Thank you, Rahul. I think this is a wonderful response, and I will come with the other speakers and then probably add more once we have space.
Thank you.
So, Prince, what do you think where you are investing in terms of technology, and what impact do you see in near term and again near term or long term in your domain, and what is the split you keep for the high risk investments in technology versus relatively stable but decent returns investment in technology? So over to you, Prince.
So I'll speak about the market that I'm currently dealing with. If you look at during the pandemic, and also there were some issues with China in supplying of raw materials to India. So what did all the pharmaceutical companies do? What did the government do? They launched several schemes in order to start API manufacturing in India. But again, the market is very competitive. So if you look at API manufacturing in India, if you look at manufacturing API in China, so there is still a huge amount of difference that comes in the RM prices. So did the manufacturers from India purchase API from India? No, they didn't. They still went to China in spite of everything. So everywhere, wherever people are investing, they are investing in automation. If you look at the pharmaceutical industry itself, so you go to any company, you go to any pharmaceutical unit, what they are doing, they are trying to automate their jobs as much as possible. So reducing the dependability on their employees. Also, this not only betters their product, this also reduces the cost. So we are also in this rat race of reducing the cost. Now, if you look at the computing strength, so we are doubling it almost every 18 months. Also, if you look at people are investing more and more and they are not getting returns, like as Rahul very rightly mentioned, that there are some of the technologies that we have invested in, or the small companies that they invest in, they don't need it. So ultimately, what is that going to do? That is only going to create debt, and debt along with deflation is going to create a spiral negative growth. So it's going to hit very hard. Now, also what we are doing is we are having a false belief that we can have deflation in some part of our society and we can have inflation in some part of the society. So that's not going to run. That might work for some time, but ultimately you will either have deflation or you will either have inflation. So we are having false beliefs also. Also this, since people are raising funds, they are putting in more money. We are talking about these food delivery apps, or there are a lot of other unicorns. So it's only raining unicorns in India. But if you go down to their business, if you look at the grassroots levels, if you're making profits, if you're doing good, so why do you need to keep on raising more and more funds, more and more funds? So it's only creating an environment of debt, nothing else. Also, people have created a lot of false comparison. Like people compare electricity with AI, but electricity was not smarter than humans, and they are not building electricity was never built to be smarter than humans. Also, I see AI as nothing but it's only trial and error. It's only we have huge data sets. We keep on trialing, we keep on trying with all these data sets. Okay, this is the final thing that we are trying. And what we are also trying to do is AI, with the help of AI, we are trying to create a function for every job role. So ultimately, few years down the line, what we will do, we would have created a job function for every role. So the service sector is obviously going to be impacted, not now, but in the long run, yes. And the false comparisons that we are creating, that is something which I'm very afraid of. Also, if you look at the energy sector now, forget about OTT or the food delivery app. If you look at the energy sector now, initially there was a rat race for coal, and then there was people are running after oil. Now people are running after wind and solar. So if some point in time we'll have something like this where the cost of energy goes down to zero. People will have not to spend any money for energy, but energy contributes about 9 to 10% of every economy. So what about this 9 to 10% hit that every economy is going to take in the years to come? And job creation is obviously there. So these are some of the points which I would like to make. Everybody's running after automation, but some of that is not needed. It's only creating, you spend 10 rupees in getting that automated, and then you have to spend 20 rupees in just the maintenance part of it. So I don't think it makes any sense.
No, very good point, Prince. And in fact, some deeper questions also asked there. So probably I will come to the deeper questions in the next round. But I think the point which you made is quite valid, that not everything needs to be automated. And I think Tesla Gigafactory is the example where Elon Musk himself said that probably we tried to automate those functions which are probably at obviously current level are better done by humans. For example, in the maintenance of the factory, and they said we try to over automate, and this is also a possibility where a lot of people sometimes get excited, and obviously there's another big factor which is the extra money lying around. So if you have a lot of PVC money as a startup, and they say you do something in this, so obviously you can't say no, and you will do something in AI, for example, or something in some other domain, and that's where some of the things happen. But again, very interesting point. Let me now move on to Dr. Roshan, and what do you see the investments coming in? Of course, Prince also covered some part of the APIs, but where do you see technology playing a role, and what's happening in your domain?
Okay, fair point. No, thank you, Nirupam. So when it comes to the investment, there are always two sides of it. One is the hardcore, like the manufacturing segment, okay, and that is something greatly investment is happening from the foreign lands to Indian facilities, because there is a heavy demand of the pharmaceuticals. And looking at the kind of scenarios in the even the next 10 years, there is going to be series of investment in this particular manufacturing and the R&D segment, right? Whereas when I look into the service segment point of view with respect to the pharmaceutical aspect itself, there is still a heavy investment on the technology part of it, right? Because at the end of the day, every single pharma company, directly or indirectly with the support of the service sectors, would like to increase their productivity, would like to enhance their manufacturing capabilities, would like to enhance their production output at the lower cost, right? And that will obviously lead to the automation of the various processes, automation of the data points, automations of the kind of compilations of the very complex scientific informations to build the dossiers, and the time to file the dossiers and getting the approvals. So obviously here the technology is playing a crucial role. And if I would like to highlight where are the areas where the investment is happening, especially in the pharmaceutical and the kind of budget for the R&D have been increased, are with respect to the artificial intelligence, the big data analytics, the flexible production concepts, right? And there is on top of that the precision medicines, right? If I further extend, there are the investment happening in the blockchain technologies, the extended reality, and most importantly, the real world data, because in the scientific and the pharmaceutical domain, there is a heavy data get generated scientifically, which needs the mining of the data with the advanced tools and techniques to reduce the errors and bring the quality of analytics on the table. And Further to that, what we have seen, the digital transformation in the therapeutics category also, even in the healthcare sector, right? For example, if I take you like 2017, precisely because I was working on the healthcare technology in that point of time, and hardly 5 to 6 companies were playing in this digital platform, technology, right? And whereas today, because of the pandemic and because of the evolution of the technologies and the awareness, the healthcare platform now becomes a very common factor, right? There are more than 200 companies are working on a healthcare technology. So at one point, technology is helping to get what we are looking forward, but at the same time, because of the heavy competitions, because of the over productions, there is a direct impact on the quality of services, the pricing points, the consumer satisfaction. At long run, what we see is that it just specifically, if I mention the healthcare space, or any other linked healthcare space, where the technologies have been onboarded just to acquire the clients. So cost of acquisition of the clients, the consumers are pretty higher, and at the end of the day, the profit margins becomes very narrow. This is going to be a tug of war. How there is a balance going to be coming days. Now, the interesting fact what all of us also observe is that bringing the technology, obviously there is a kind of deflation in a certain point, and there are mainly two primary reasons which we also observe, and that includes the obviously technology reduces the demand for the resources, for the skills, staff, resources for the talent, the labor, right? And which also indirectly downward the pressure on the kind of packages or the wages being offered to the employees, right? Which in turn absolutely reduces the demand for the goods and services, and ultimately there is a less money to spend for the consumers. So this is a cycle, and now the industry is going in that particular directions, and this is the transformation is going to happen. It as of now we are enjoying the technology to the best of it, in a way to get the ease of operations, ease of services, but in long run this is going to grab the supersede over our demands, and ultimately is going to ruin the economy in a bad phase. So the deflations is going to be there. At the same time, because building a higher technological points might be giving the profit, the productivity. However, there is the now direct impact on the balancing the what you call the profit of margin, because if I take the pharmaceutical example, earlier the pharma companies used to have the gross margin of more than 60%, 70% in their production line, right? Whereas now, because of the competition, because of the early to bring formulations in the market, the pricing point have got reduced. So ultimately that impacted the gross margin. So now the company is, there are, I can say there are very few companies who are still keeping the gross margin at higher point, but majority are just managing their operations by reducing the gross margin, and working on the acquisitions, working on the volume. So now the pharma business is not just about the bringing the product to the market, but this is completely on the volume-based business. Larger the volume, possibly there is going to be a better profit, rather than just squeezing your operations to the limited volume with the narrow margins is going to just manage the show rather than growing the economy in the longer run. So investments are happening, but this is good for as of now. 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, there will be a greater impact in terms of all the aspect, all the parameters, including the resources, including the quality of the output at the same point. Now, especially my next point is like how the upcoming youngsters who are going to be part of the industry in various sectors can still manage the show and bring the laurels to their profile, is not just only sticking to what you are learning right now, but the students, the youngsters has to acquire the new skills, which is kind of competitive in the coming days. And having said that, if you have the technological skill along with your core areas, that will bring value addition to the company that you are going to work forward. So that will also balance your presence in the highly competitive market. Yeah, over to you, Anupam.
Thank you, Dr. Roshan. And I think uh, before I move on to Dr. Satchidananda, I would kind of balance for the students' purpose, because I think that we are moving in one direction. So yes, obviously we have this bigger question that if everything is being done by technology, what are humans going to be doing? And essentially, if they are not doing anything, then how are they going to be earning? Whether we will move to the basic universal basic income kind of concept, or we will have to reinvent some new work kind of stuff. And will that be what kind of society that it would look like? And essentially we are seeing these things already, right? So so what we call as the farmer protest was essentially an unemployed people who call themselves as farmers protesting. Essentially that was there. And when we have this thing, where Canada Prime Minister kind of intervened and said, no, guys, you have all right to protest. And when things happen in their own country, and they get the same medicine, and they don't even talk to the protesters, they just immediately impose an emergency. So there are wide socio dynamics around this question, socio-political and socio-economic dynamics around this question of leveraging technology. But on the positive side, I also see, especially when we look at, if we just go back to the start of the COVID period, and I call this COVID period like uh, COVID was for healthcare services, what demonetization was the payment services, right? So it suddenly spawned so much of innovation once demonetization happened, and everybody had to do something else to pay money. And UPI today is the biggest platform in the world, bigger than the Chinese platform for that matter. And same way we have this opportunity in the healthcare domain to create a services platform, which essentially is the biggest healthcare services platform. For example, I remember early days, and when we had this the ministerial discussions, and I also look after public policy for the group purpose. And they said, how we can invest, say, with working with IITs and a couple of other companies in the private sector to develop these test kits, and if we invest some money, and they would be able to do scale. And I think you and Prince also refer to the scale issue, how we can bring these things to scale. And then there are other technologies we looked at. Okay, so if we can't really do scale, can we do a micro level? For example, we at some of our institutions, we did the 3D printing of different components. And so if you can't do scale, at least we have some technology which can do things in a dynamic way. And the healthcare services overall, in terms of testing, for example, so how should we price the test? So when we initially started with calculations, our test cost was coming around, say, $1,500, and the regulation said you have to do it at $499, right? So who is going to pay the $1,000, right? So similar thing happened with the vaccines part, because in the middle, when government says you can procure the vaccines,
Right.
and we procure the vaccines, but nobody's taking that vaccine. So what do we do with that vaccine, right? So again, the pricing issue is still there. So that is there. But then there's this innovation of like the rapid antigen test, like $250.
Right.
You need, all you need is the test kit and a mobile phone. You scan the QR code, you test what you do need to do, and then you upload, and you get an authenticated approved certificate. I've never seen something like this, and I never thought this is possible. I'm like, this is out of way. This is the what I call the UPI moment of the healthcare services.
Right.
So
The kind of sci-fi world.
earlier, you have to do a test, you have to go give us, somebody needs to come to your place with the whole and people
Exactly.
will wonder what's happened to you now, and then you do, and then go back and do some test, and you never know whether how authentic that test report is. And there's a lot of rumors going around, and then you say, okay, fine, I'm positive or negative. But nevertheless, it's interesting development. So over to you, Dr. Satchidanand, how you are seeing this investments, especially what kind of investments you are making in this domain, and And where do you see the impact coming in near future?
Sure. Thanks, Nirupam. I think most of my colleagues have given a lot of perspective on how it's happening. I will get on with the numbers. So most of the Fortune 100 or 500 companies. So I've worked with Philips Healthcare and then Siemens Healthcare, and they are number one and number two in medical technology globally. So Philips, GE, and Siemens actually constitute 90% of the market share in medical technology. And and if you talk of, let's say, Medtronics, Johnson Johnson, all of these big companies, they typically spend 8 to 10% of the EBITDA, not EBIT, but EBITDA on R&D. So in bad years, it is 8%. In good years, it is 10%. And if they have a blockbuster sale, then it goes up to 11, 12%. If we take a example of a typical innovation, let's say in radiology, let's say in MR or CT or ultrasound, for a big company, it typically takes anywhere between 800 million to 1.2 billion. And the timeline it takes is anywhere between 8 to 10 years before they can come up with a fundamental innovation. I'm not talking about incremental innovations. I have myself been a part of the R&D team. I have led teams in APAC and global. Now there, just to give you an example, Philips last year launched the helium-free or close to helium-free kind of blue seal technology for MR. Now this is a sea change in MR technology because MR is known to use helium to the tune of 5,000 liters to 10,000 liters to 15,000 liters for cooling. Now that comes down to 15 liters, 1.5 from 5,000 liters. That's a heavy innovation which has happened. So because the amount of heat generation, heat sink required is almost the same. So it has taken them close to good 8 to 10 years to come up that innovation. But did that come cheap? No, it is in excess of $1 billion how it happens. Another example, if you see, is IBM. IBM, of course, sold its hardware business, server business, and then went on to software, and that too specifically healthcare focused AI. And today, one of their biggest solution is Dr. Watson. And I was fortunate because in early stages of Dr. Watson, one of my ex-colleagues from Philips was the core architect for Dr. Watson in IBM. So when he left Philips Research, he joined IBM. So we understand Dr. Watson as good as him within Philips as well. So when I saw the product, I mean, contrary to what some of you were speaking, the innovation is not to substitute doctors, substitute nurses or paramedics or technicians, as many of the people in US thought. It was more to complement or supplement their efforts in hospitals. Because today, if a surgeon says that, okay, uh, let's take the case of a neurosurgery versus a neurologist. The neurologist would say that, okay, there is a hemorrhage and I can give a drug which will dry up the hemorrhage. And the neurosurgeon says that there is a compression on the false cerebri. So I need to do a withdrawal. So I need to open up the cerebrum and then remove the fluid. So fluid removal versus fluid drying up. Two mechanisms, two different sorts of thoughts. Now who defines it? So Dr. Watson is a mechanism which can tell you is what is the success versus failure rate in a open operation versus a closed operation or a non-invasive mechanism. What is the success rate for a drug-induced or a therapeutic induced drying of that hemorrhagic site? Now, all of these mechanisms are actually helping doctors in doing their procedures better. Now, what is the kind of investments that IBM has done? It is in actually in multiples of few billions of dollars, which has gone into this. Uh, the biggest teams in IBM are working on this. So actually, as one of our co-speakers was speaking, it is about skill enhancement in newer fields. So you'll have to retrain yourself, reskill yourself. So people who have gotten educated 30 years back, who under Philip Kotler, never knew what is digital marketing. And today, if you don't know what's a search engine optimization and search engine marketing, are probably not fit to be in the marketing function anymore. So I mean, things are changing. We'll have to accept that things are changing. When I joined the industry about 17, 18 years back, I never studied digital marketing. And today, when I talk to my marketing department, the only thing they come back with a lead versus prospect funnel, which has come from some tool. So I think at the end of the day, we need to understand that innovation is here to stay. We have to be the part of that channel. Well, it will not lead to service depletion. It will lead to service improvement also. Like I talked about in terms of Dr. Watson. Dr. Watson is actually adding value to neurology and neurosurgery. So it is an enhancement. It is not reducing jobs. Similarly, if the other showcase that I have was for automobile companies. So my last project was with Mercedes Daimler way back in 2009-10 when their launch was of A class and B class in global markets. So that time what they used to do is the component assemblies used to be manufactured separately in 10 different units, and then they used to get assembled in one German unit, and I've been to that unit also. Now later on, when they did a 3D printing of the whole unit itself, like the front, bonnet and the chassis all integrated as one 3D unit. So you don't need to have those logistics costs. You don't need to have those servicing cost of independent units. You just remove the entire front bonnet, the entire unit comes off, and then you can replace it in one shot. Many people said that, okay, it will reduce a lot of service people's jobs, but actually it didn't. It improved efficiency. So instead of servicing 20 cars in a day, they could go up to 30, 40 cars in a day in a German unit. It's not the same case in India because that service load is not that high in Indian Mercedes showrooms. But then that's the case where we need to understand that globally, everybody is moving towards a scenario where you can actually improve things by applying technology. So this deflationary versus inflationary economy is an economic debate, but on ground, how is industry looking at it? We are completely optimistic about it, and all of us are trying to invest in technology to the tune of 10 to 15% of EBITDA, so that we can really drive something home at the end of the day and be satisfied with what we have done during the work hours.
Again, good point, Dr. Satchidananda. In fact, I was with IBM prior to my current role in Hero, and
Great.
I had worked with the IBM research labs on some of their AI projects and taking them to market, advising them on that, and identifying newer technologies which they should work on the research part. So it's very interesting and it's very important also. It's not sometimes just linked to the price point, because if we look at purely the medical side of things, and you talk about Dr. Watson, the knowledge base is expanding so fast. I mean, how many research papers can a doctor keep in his head all the time? There's a
Yes.
limitation to it, and we need these technologies to augment, like you mentioned. So in research is happening all the time, like we saw in COVID phase. Some lab in UK saying something on COVID, what this virus looks like. Somebody in saying Germany something saying else. Somebody in US doing something else. Somebody in China doing something. Russia, India. Everybody is doing the stuff, and unless we collaborate and we can understand these knowledge bases together, you can't find a cure. And obviously the time scale compression which has happened in this COVID phase to identify and develop vaccines and other things, these are critical areas where there is no substitute to technology. We can't have 10,000 people doing the same thing and trying to figure out a solution. So that's not really going to work. But these are interesting viewpoints, and I'm really thankful to you also and other panel members to bringing such diverse viewpoints. And I see some questions popping up from students. So, and some are directed questions and some may be general. So, but feel free to drop in your viewpoints. And let me take the first question coming from Diksha Panwar. She is saying the medical, I am assuming she, or could be he, but anyway.
Right.
So the medical innovation is slow and takes 10 to 13 years to adopt. Do you think this is a very long period? And if yes, any suggestions to improve it? So we have a lot of people who can take a shot at it. Please feel free to go ahead, whoever wants
Okay,
to.
I'll start that maybe because I put in that point. Let me just break it up into phases. If you, let's say I talked about the MR innovation or CT innovation, which takes 10 years, but there are already some sub segments which you can work on in Agile and Scrum phases. Like MR has something known as sequences, MR sequences or CT sequences, etc., or protocols, which can be developed in less than 6 months to 1 year. There are something known as IQ enhancements or image quality enhancements, which can be worked on in 1 to 2 years. So when I talk about a 10 to 13 years, I'm talking about a whole change in platform. But at a sub segment level or at a platform, sub platform level, you can do multiple things every year. And that's how I think the team is surviving also. Otherwise, nobody would pay them for 13 years just to work on one big platform. So every year they had to churn out something which is being worked not in a waterfall level. So I'm sure all of you know what is a waterfall versus a Scrum versus Agile, because that's the need of the hour. So everybody is working in Agile teams. They're developing small outputs, which is getting validated as we speak, and that's how the industry is surviving. Yeah.
Sure.
Maybe I can add to this. What Satchidananda has given the perspective from the more on the devices perspective, right? Since I come from the hardcore pharmaceutical, where the drug discovery phase itself is very complex, risk involved, and takes more than like 14 years to bring that one single candidate molecule as a drug, right, to the market. So what typically used to happen in the early discovery phase, where almost 20,000 candidate molecules, right? We say the compounds, which is not even yet proven having the pharmaceutical effect, pharmacological actions. But those 20,000 compound used to be screened earlier, and hardly 20 molecules, the candidates used to come in the early phase of discovery, right? But now what happens, and that's the reason, like there was a very complex process of doing the clinical studies, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then you get the technology transfer, the doses get approved from the FDA, and then you go for the commercials, having the 20 years patent lifespan, but hardly you get 4 to 5, 6 years to do the actual, the innovative product marketing and getting the market value, right? But now what happens, rather than screening that 20,000 candidates in the earlier eras, because of the available technologies in the scientific and the pharmaceutical domain, where there are a lot of predefined sets are available, and those softwares, those technologies can now be used in the discovery also, where now rather than depending upon the very complex process of evaluation, you can simply use those smart tools, and you can conclude your analysis in that way, right? So these are being used in the clinical trials, or you use in the phase 1, phase 2 trials. Then there is a pharmacovigilance, then there is a pharmacodynamic softwares are available. There are the drug screening softwares available. There are the scientific molecular data level sets are available. So these have been already been used and implemented. So nowadays, the discovery, which is a $1 billion business, to bring that one molecule to the market, is now going to be comparatively affordable, economical, and with the reduced timeline. So that is how is the technology is currently playing in the industry. Whereas if I talk about the generic formulations, was the innovator used to take 14 years. The generic formulation hardly take 2 years to bring those the same molecule, having the same pharmacological actions and giving the same therapeutic benefits within just 2 years time frame now. So that is how the entire evolution is been happening. We using the technologies and the tools. Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. In fact, we have this live example in India, right? When we had this COVID, and
Right.
DRDO was working on this the cancer drug, and they suddenly
Exactly.
realized
Exactly.
this drug could be actually used when the oxygen supply issue was happening, and they repurposed
Right.
that and actually made it available. So you have to use the technology to use your existing databases of knowledge and see what you can do quickly. And again, very, very interesting question again. Thank you,
But I
Diksha.
think just to add on to Nirupam, what you said, I think they tried to use an anti-parasitic in COVID, and they tried to use a general purpose antibiotic in COVID, and many of them were unproven claims. And at the end of the day, WHO and other global agencies figured out that neither azithromycin is a great drug for this, nor so many of these formulations and protocols which were defined at a local level didn't have any scientific backup. So I think it's important to understand technology from an end-to-end basis and how they can really validate these claims.
Absolutely, absolutely. So next question is directed to Prince. So Prince, from Shraddha Mantri, as more investments is made in information technology, worker productivity may go down instead of up. So why are businesses investing so much in new technology? You can't hear you, Prince. You have to unmute yourself.
I had already replied. The base of this question is itself, like, how can you assume that investing in technology, bringing AI could lower down the employees' performance. If you look at from our point of view, initially when this marketing representatives used to go to these doctors, they used to have these visual aids, the books. So they used to flip those pages and they used to show the doctors, this is the advantage, this is the advantage. Now, if you look at major companies like Cipla, Pfizer, Alkem, all of them, they are giving tabs, Salesforce powered tabs. So why have the company involved? Because initially, if you look at the pharma sector itself, I will speak, these employees, these marketing guys hardly used to work about for 10 to 15 days. They used to go to one place, say it's 10 kilometers, they used to write down 20 kilometers. So there was a lot of leakage. There was a lot of problem issues related to performance. Now with the advent of Salesforce application, they are giving tabs for tracking the marketing activities, the return on investment, like you're doing a campaign, any campaign you're doing with your doctor. So what is the return on that? So with the advent of technology, the performance has only become better. So the assumption itself is not correct.
So let me add another perspective to Shraddha's question, very different dimension. So Shraddha, I think the basic premise is also that why are we, if we forget businesses for a minute and profitability as the objective for a minute, why do we use technology? We use technology because it makes our life easier, right? And easier by definition would mean less productivity, right? Depending on how you're measuring productivity. So isn't that the goal of our lives, to be less productive? I leave that open question to you, and as a challenge. But let me take on the next question in interest of time. We have from Suvarthi Roy, and to all panelists. I don't know he, she, but in the US, Federal Reserve has been issuing huge amounts of debt through quantitative easing. Yet this has failed to raise inflation levels, and interest rates have even gone negative. Yet, why there is no recognition in monetary policies about deflationary pressure from technology? And this is a question which is normally ignored, but some people are asking this question, and great question again. Anybody wants to take a stab at this? Why is first thing, is the premise correct? The deflationary pressure from tech is ignored, or if it is accounted, it's not really relevant. What's the reason behind this? Anybody wants to take it?
No, I think the everywhere governments are taking measures. If you look at when Facebook was launched, nobody cared about what Facebook is. And then the US government started putting up a lot of pressure and a lot of questions. Also, if you look at Flipkart here in India, initially they didn't have to pay much taxes. So now they have to pay taxes. So it is not that the government is not putting pressure. The government is obviously putting pressure. But again, as I said, that the
Did we lose Prince? Looks like. Any other speaker wants to take a stab till we get Prince back?
Maybe I can talk about it from a medical technology industry.
Sure.
Well, we understand this problem, especially from a US market perspective. There has been a lot of quantitative easing even for the medtech industry. Like, let's say, many of the smaller players, like somebody like a UMG Dell, or somebody like a Agfa or a Fuji in US, which was going through a bad phase. They have taken huge amounts of debt in this. But I would say that government has been very sensitive to these pressures, these deflationary pressures, because what they have done is that, let's say, if the company wanted to de-recruit people out of their service teams, let's say for some time, they said that can you figure out another country for them? Like, let's say in Europe, instead of Western Europe, you can shift them to Eastern Europe, where you are obviously not planning to deploy your technology so easily. Similarly, from one function to another. So multi-skilling, reskilling has taken some amount of importance within the company. So I think there is a pressure from the company and also from the government side in terms of policies. Well, whether it is monetary policy, whether it is fiscal policy, or whether it is corporate policy, that's a question of debate. But yes, there is a pressure from all the tech companies that yes, how do you substitute? I'll give you another example. We used to use all the Cisco and the Juniper networks for all our meetings. Now, when Zoom came in and most of the people had their personal Zoom IDs, most of the meetings shifted to that. So actually, most of our meeting rooms started getting empty. So did we get rid of all the meeting equipment? No, we didn't actually, because what happened is there are certain old age setups, like let's say factories, where people are not that aware of IT technology, etc. Where still we have a IT department which will help in setting up a web call, etc. So for them, we shifted the equipment there. So at the end of the day, this is a recirculation. This is a circular economy, so to say, not in terms of recycling, but there are markets, there are segments where this technology is going to be still relevant. So it is a more a question of rechannelizing it to the right level. And yes, there is a monetary policy associated with it. There is also a fiscal policy from the government which is associated with it. So I feel that's a very relevant question that Suvarti has asked.
Sure, and I think it's a good point. And just to add from my side, am I frozen or no? It's fine. Okay. So just to add from my side, and is that the element is that technology is not the only deflationary pressure, right here. So we have multiple deflationary pressures. So what Fed has been doing in printing money is to actually balance the deflationary pressure of the COVID, which is essentially which led to the supply chains getting disrupted, which led to the demands, especially a lot of layoffs and furloughs that happened in the initial phases, which reduced the purchasing power of the people, and people were not spending. So that actually was a huge deflationary pull in the short to medium term, which was balanced by the inflation being pumped by the printing of money. And why the negative interest rates are fairly simple, because interest rates, again, it dependent on how the economy is growing, and if economy is not growing, you can't have a positive inflation interest rate and the inflation for that matter to balance it out. So these are all linked, because ultimately on the base inflation you have to have profits to pay back the interest. So you need to have this a combination of things. And yes, technology itself is leading its march, and technology is leading its march even before the COVID and from the dot-com era and prior to that. So technology itself is a very big efficiency driver, and Satchidananda very rightly talked about the leverage we can use, and again how we can do a portfolio approach to the where you want to use what technology. But I think this is essentially also a slightly political issue, because a lot of money printing happened not purely to control the deflationary, but to buy votes, which all of politicians and democracies do, so that people continue to keep getting them elected into the position of powers. So that's also a big factor. And a lot of this money is actually gone to the stock markets and cryptocurrencies, and I don't know what productivity is there. So we also should ask that question to not just human productivity, but also to the capital productivity sometime. But I think these are very good questions, and kind of we are running on time now. But any other panel members had any last comment on this, and then I will hand over to the teams at IIM Sirmaur to close the session. Any other speakers? Sorry, Prince, you wanted to. Sorry, we got interrupted. So, Prince, you want to complete your comment, and then probably we can hand over to IIM Sirmaur.
Yes, like what I was saying is that the government is obviously taking measures to counter all these tech companies, and they are increasing the taxes. The companies, the online stores which were not taxable, now they all have to pay GST. You are getting GST invoices. So it is not that the government is not taking steps. Government is taking steps, and that is being taken all around the globe, not just in India.
Sure. In fact, governments are, I mean, I think there are new tendencies, especially in democracies, to blame everything on government. So So I think, with the rise in protest everywhere, but nevertheless, but governments are doing work, especially we see in India, Finance Minister, the budget she gave was very growth oriented, and the RBI and the Finance Ministry working together to control the monetary policy and stuff. So I think we are pretty good hands in good shape and actually coming out very well. I would like to again thank the panel and hand over to the IIM Sirmaur team to the final closure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful discussion that we had. We learned a lot of things. So I would like to call upon Harneet for the formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Yashvi. Am I audible properly?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so esteemed panelists, my fellow batchmates and faculties, I feel fortunate and very privileged to get to address this esteemed panel and to listen to their insightful session. On behalf of IIM Sirmaur and the whole Sampreshan team, I would like to express my deepest gratitude for your enlightening thoughts and discussions on the panel that we had on the topic deflationary effect of the technology on the service industry. Before closing, I would like to point out some of the most insightful points that all of you have mentioned. Starting with Nirupam sir, you talked about some of the services that used to be free, and due to the COVID, now it's a norm to be paying for those services, but still it's a deflationary effect because in the longer run, there is an opportunity cost that we are saving by sitting in our homes and getting those things in our hand. Moving on to Mr. Prince, you beautifully started with a simple and yet very effective example of website development few years back when you were in the college, and now how deflationary effect has caused due to the emerging market and the emerging competition in the field. And there was a quote that you mentioned. There was a very important line that not everything needs to be automated. And you gave an example that we are celebrating the advent of AI and the driverless cars, but what about those drivers which will lose the opportunity and the lifetime that they have, learned to drive the cars? Moving on to Dr. Roshan, there was a beautiful discussion on tech-based, upliftment of manufacturing and service in the pharmaceutical industry. You talked about there is a lot of investment that has to go in the industry of the pharmaceutical industry, in the manufacturing or the service side of the pharmaceutical industry. Dr. Satchidananda, you talked about the dilemma that we have with the advent of automation in the healthcare service, the long innovation and the adoption cycle that still exists in the pharmaceutical industry, and how we have to cope up with that it will exist for a longer time as well. And finally, Mr. Rahul, you talked about the quality of services that has increased, but the prices has still either remained stagnant or reduced, and the vague relationship that has followed because of that between the price and the quality of the content that we consume, and the confusion that consumer experiences on a daily basis. So I would like to thank all of you for your insightful discussion on the topic, and I hope we get a chance to meet you guys all again on campus someday, and we can gain more such insightful sessions from you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Harneet.
Thank you.
Thank you all. It was indeed a great pleasure. Thank you. Looking forward.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.